Suddenly, I feel weird. Mm, I'm not exactly too sure how to start this one. My friend and I low-key made this pact where it was like if she expressed specific emotions and situations that she's faced, I'll do the same in solidarity because I think how she was going to express herself in her own form was so beautiful. And I was like, dude, you have to. And in solidarity, I'll do the same. So this is mine. The topic of mental health is just so touchy. Just because I think I think the world's response to having more conversations around mental health is was very interesting just because I think at a point like it became almost a trend because it became this like relatable #relatable thing to be struggling with depression or like anxiety that I feel like you couldn't tell who's struggling and who isn't struggling. And it's also the type of thing where you can't point fingers and be like this person's struggling, this person isn't struggling, because it's like it could be the person that to always be smiling the most and joking the most that is really going through something behind closed doors that you have no idea about. And first of all, trigger warning, there's a lot of conversations about SA, SH, and yeah, just topics around that and just mental health and dark times and just topics like that. So if that's a bit too dark for you, feel free to click off. But just in case you think this is just another yap session with me. But anyways, yeah, I think that it became a trend to the point where if I were to talk about, say, if you were struggling with something, that little you would have that thought where it's like, if I were to talk about this, would it be taken seriously? Because it's like there's so many people going through it that it's like, how do I don't know. It's just anyway, that's just a fear I had where it was like, maybe I don't, will I be taken seriously? A, B, is it even that serious enough for me to have a conversation about my mental health and make it a thing? B, that's B. C, part of the time I really just guilt tripped myself into believing that I'm dramatic. I think that like all of this will make sense when I continue on into what I'm about to say. I don't really have an agenda. I do, but I don't. I think I do. Do I have an agenda? I think I do. I think I have like a mental idea of what it is this is supposed to be. But anyways, I just very much viewed, because I think like when I think naturally I'm just very in tune with the world of psychology. I'm a psych major. Like it's always been something that I'm just interested in terms of mindfulness, brain health, just cognitive psychology. Why do humans operate this way, and like, how to remain at your optimum kind of level of being functional and being, just living up to your potential and all of that. I feel I've just always been so fascinated by that kind of aspect of the brain and like your mental state or whatever. And I think because I'd say I grew up privileged. Like I grew up not worrying if food was gonna be on the table when I come home from school. I grew up not worrying if, I'm gonna be turned away from school because we didn't pay school fees, or if I wasn't able to, I don't know, contribute to charity day at school in some way because, I think I very much grew up not having those things to worry about, and I went to good schools. Like I had great opportunities when it comes to even post-secondary um education, and when it comes to even just like, I don't know, traveling, seeing the world, like living in a safe home, having, steady parents who aren't abusive and are actually loving and are actually care for, our well-being and want us to be the best people and the happiest that we can be. So I definitely grew up in a privileged I grew up living a privileged life, I'd say. And also because like yes, I'm black, but I grew up in Africa. So I'd say, and the problems in Africa are less, at least I'll speak for Uganda. The problems in Uganda growing up were more classism than race, if anything. I think the way we speak about, or the way it seems race is spoken about in the Western world and the injustices faced there, it's kind of like for us, at least it felt like it was very much the same thing but classism. So it's like the injustice and the just insane things that are going on that had gone on in, this could be a whole other topic, but I think it's so funny to me because there's just a lot of messed up things that happen every day, and it's just very beyond scary and very beyond messed up. And in my head, it's kind of funny how, like, at least the people that I grew up around, and I definitely also did this too, where it's like we're more educated on, race issues that are happening in the Western world, but we don't talk about the classism and what the realities of what it's like to not be the privileged percentage living in an African, well, living in Uganda, you know? And it is like people die. And it's like we don't talk about it. Like election season is dangerous because people actually die. People get killed and we don't talk about it. And I think in that sense, I also grew up privileged because I was very protected from the injustice that is present and is extreme and just so heartbreaking and so ridiculous, and it just boils my blood that we just don't have enough conversations about that. And and this is, I feel like this is an issue in a lot of, perhaps it could also be because I did go to international school, so I think we're just brainwashed to think about the freaking West way more than we should, but the Western world way more than we should. But yeah, that could be a whole other YouTube video. But yeah, I just grew up very aware that I was privileged. So I think any problem that I had, especially when it came to like mental health, in my head, it was my first response was always, Gabby, it's your fault that you're feeling this way. It has to be, because you have everything you could ever need. Like you're living somebody's dream life. The hell are you depressed about? The hell are you anxious about? The hell are you scared about? The hell are you, like, why are you not taking um advantage of these opportunities? Why are you not doing X, Y, and Z? Why are you sad? Why are you like whatever? Like I wouldn't let myself experience negative emotions. You know what I mean? Like even with things that objectively no one would have that kind of, no one should have that kind of response to. Those were the responses that I had to myself because I was just too aware of how privileged that I was, which is something I'm so thankful for. I think my parents did a great job of raising us to be aware because I did go to some nice to like good schools and I was surrounded by people who are not aware how privileged they are and people who feel very entitled to the life that their parents gave them in a sense where they feel almost above. They just, you can just sense that there's this I don't know, classism, a whole thing. I'm trying not to, my ADHD brain, I'm trying not to jump into a whole different topic. But anyway, um I think that because I also was super obsessed with, psychology and how we end up, how people end up in certain situations because of, entertaining certain cognitive patterns and just entertaining certain behaviors that make it easier for you to slip into a negative mindset. I was super obsessed with that world. So again, it also added onto it being very easy for me to blame myself for any negative emotion that I had or anything that would go wrong in my life, or even if I was like a victim or whatever, it's kind of like I would find a way to blame myself because I think a philosophy that I also largely live by is that if everything is going wrong in your life, if you somehow keep like getting romantically involved with people who are toxic or you toxic friendships or like I don't know, toxic, whatever. If it's like, and it very much feels as though you are the victim of those situations. I'm also a big believer that if it is a constant pattern that you're experiencing these negative situations, then there is a role that you're playing in it. Sometimes I took that philosophy to a faulty, I took it to a different level that was not healthy. But yeah, I would just kind of like everything that happened to me or anything that I ever experienced, my first response to that is that okay, somehow this is my fault, so let me figure out how it's my fault. Anyway, sometimes I feel like when it comes to talking about mental health, sometimes I'm hesitant just because I'm trying to figure out who it's helpful to. Because again, at this, like, I remember at the start, I mentioned how at some point it became a trend. And it's funny because it's like, I don't believe anyone should ever be quick to question if someone is faking it or not, just because the brain is such a powerful thing that even if you did start off faking it, at some point it's gonna become a real thing because you're teaching your brain that this is the reality. You know what I mean? I'd have this interesting take that my professor talked about, and it was basically, and I've always kind of thought about this, but I thought this was something that I was one of my negative patterns of just finding a way to blame myself. But he said it in an interesting way that made me think of it differently. But he said, when it comes to disorders specifically, it's like he compared it to having some a physical an issue physically, like say you break your leg, and he was like, at some point, like, yes, you go to the doctor and you have a broken leg, and like, yes, you can go to a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist, and they could be like, yeah, you have depression, like clinical depression, but that doesn't mean, or like you have an issue with anxiety or whatever it is. It's like that doesn't mean you have anxiety for forever, or same way as you don't have a broken leg for forever. You know what I mean? At some point, you're not going to have a broken leg, but still, you might or might not have a limp because of the way you went about following what you should do in order to heal. Do you see what I mean? So it's kind of like, I think when it comes to mental health, I think obviously I'm not a professional, so take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. This is just me and my theories. But I think it's interesting to me how we're super quick to kind of want to throw a label on this struggle that we have mentally and have it be a permanent label. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think there is a lot of clarity that can come from, okay, I think my brain just operates differently. And I think that's very helpful um to a lot of people. But I think the brain, not but additionally, the brain is it's a very powerful organ and a very powerful thing. So for some people, like, I think I definitely fall under this category where it's like a label makes it kind of manifests it more in my life. You know what I mean? Just because I think I'm just an overthinker, so I will start to find a way to, I don't know. It will make sense as I go along, but go along I don't know, get to, if I even explain. I don't know how much I'm gonna explain or talk about, but yeah. Anywho's, um, I feel like for the longest time with my own, like, I feel like we all have at some point we all have some kind of story of how we struggled with mental health, or we were just like in a bad place. We're only human. Like, at some point you're gonna go to the doctor because you have a bad stomach. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of part of life. To at some point, or maybe not. Some people are very healthy and have never like gone to the doctor for anything that had to. I don't know. Is that a thing? I don't know. Anyway, no, I'm just talking to talk. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. Um, I feel as though I there's a level of like, I feel like I was held captive to a certain narrative of mental health due to my own experiences. I think the people around me at certain points in time where I was struggling kind of set out this underlying like energy that it's an embarrassing thing to talk about, or like an embarrassing thing to be dealing with, or something that you shouldn't be proud of, and something that you shouldn't talk about with your friends and shouldn't, entertain conversation too much. And it was never blatantly said to me, but you could definitely feel the energy of like the adults around me that were very much there for me through harder times or like weird times. You could just definitely feel like it was something that was supposed to be hush hush. It was also sometimes like very much this thing that was posed as a weakness. So and a weakness that I'm supposed to be working on in order to alleviate this thing because it isn't something to be proud of. And I think that for the longest time, I was made to feel like I'm not trying hard enough or like I'm welcoming this thing into my life. I think that also additionally added on to that, that loop of, okay, as soon as something's wrong, oh, it's my fault. Like, how do I figure out, how do I figure this out? How do I fix it? It was my fault somehow. I don't know how it was my fault, but I know it was my fault, so I need to fix it, type of thing. And I think it became easier for me to keep certain things a secret and just to develop very unhealthy ways of coping. And I think it's very interesting to me because it was almost like people around me didn't understand that if someone is struggling with certain, I'm trying to figure out like, because I don't want to use triggering words, so I'm trying to figure out like how to say this one. Anyway, for someone who's struggling with like blank ideation, I don't know if you can actually say these things on YouTube. That's why I'm saying it this way. I'm not just like trying to whatever, but that kind of ideation or SH, it's almost like people don't understand that that person wants more than anyone to be better. So, you know, it's just this very very rough back and forth of the world kind of blaming you and you're trying really hard, but at the same time it's like this thing has like a mind of its own, but then again you can't give in to the fact that it has a mind of its own because maybe that's also you causing it to have this power. I don't know, it's just this endless cycle of like I don't know if I'm even making sense. But anyway, I'm trying to figure out. I feel like with filming this, I'm also trying to figure out what the purpose of me saying this or potentially posting this on YouTube is. Um, I think in my head, I feel like this is to break free. That's very much like a theme in my life right now, is really trying to live a life that's true to me and not true to what I've been taught should be important to me when I know those things aren't important to me. Plus, it was like a big part of my life, honestly, a lot of the things that happened. And it's so interesting to me how like a lot of people that are close to me just don't know this side of my life because I feel like I'm very much this like silly, like unserious, not unserious, but just like this silly person that exists and just like, just is chilling and like sure loves to have deep conversation and stuff and just like, it's just a simple gal. But yeah, anyways, I honest that's but that is me. I'm not saying that isn't me. Anyways, I remember like the first time I ever had, I felt like when I was growing up as a kid, there were certain things that like I had issues with. And it's so funny because it's like even like growing up and like now being able to have these conversations with like my mom and stuff. We'll have a conversation where like you know that thing? She was like, yeah, was I think now it's making sense. And we're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I feel like that wasn't, I think maybe you just had a bit of a, type of thing. Anyway, can you tell I'm getting awkward? Okay. So I remember like at some point in my life, I don't know I don't know what happened, but I think my mom described it one day like this, and I feel like this is the best way to put it, but it's kind of like at some point a flip switched and I was just never the same. And I went from being this kid who was like super bubbly, super like this like diva that like freaking owned whatever, like and just like was living her own life to this kid that was so in her head. And I think a lot of it wasn't just, you could tell that it was affecting my life because it wasn't just like maybe me being less bubbly or my personality changing. It was also very much a thing of like my grades are slipping, my sports life was slipping, everything was slipping because this thing started to take up a large part of my life and I just didn't know how to talk about it. And I don't think I knew what mental health was or SH was or SA was until until years later when it became a thing and I was like, "Oh, I think certain things are happening to me and I think I need help and I'm freaking out." And I think anyway, so like I feel like at the age of like 14, 15-ish is when I started to kind of like get a bit more health. Things like eating and sleeping have always kind of been interests. I'm more sleeping. I don't know. Anyway, just like certain small things, I don't know, just my health kind of became interesting. My physical health, and a lot of it was very much attached to my mental health. And it was the first time, I think I remember the first time going to like a clinical psychologist versus just, like a counselor. They're different branches of psychology. It's not all the same thing. I feel like people talk about it like it's the same thing, but it's not. So I think for the most part, I think at the start I just saw like a few counselors, but that just wasn't, helping. And then at some point I went like to see a clinical psychologist, and that was like the most draining day of my life. I think that was one of the hardest days of my life because I think at that point is when I said certain things out loud that I had never said to anyone else. And obviously because I'm like 14, 15, these are things that have to be told to my parents. Yeah, anyway. So it's just a that was a dark time. That was for definitely a dark time. I think at that point I avoided topics that had to do with SA. If anyone ever asked, I would always deny, deny, deny. Just because it was also unfortunately one of those things where person was very close to my life. So it was like I was so aware that because I also just didn't know what it was, and I was a child, it was kind of like one of those things where I thought I was gonna get in trouble. So it was just like, maybe I shouldn't say it, like my fault, question mark, probably. So let me just shut up. But yeah, that's not something that I did talk about at that point. So that was still something that I kept to myself. But the topic of, certain, ideation and uh SH became a thing, and this topic of OCD started to show up with my life, and it was something that like I had, I think, like maybe second opinions on. Second, I've it's something that's come up. I feel like I've had like a couple, I would say like 4 to 5 different people kind of land on the same thing of OCD. And in my head, like I feel like we only know OCD to be a certain type of thing. So I was in denial because I was like, I don't think you guys do you guys know what OCD is? I think you're wrong. I think that's incorrect. And it's funny because it's like a part of me really wanted to, you know, have that, have like an intervention with a professional in order to like have an a label to be put on it so it could make sense to me. But it's almost like all the labels that were consistently put on it, I was very much like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. But then over time, I like actually had the opportunity to learn more about it and learn why they landed on that. Um, which is also started to just connect certain dots in like behaviors. But it's weird because I don't think it's something I don't necessarily, as I said at the start, I don't identify with that. Does that make sense? I don't think of myself as someone who has OCD because I think very much at this point in my life, I would say I don't have OCD. Sure, do I have some tendencies? For sure, but I think I tend to view it as, at least for myself, I'm just gonna say this for myself because I'm not a professional whatsoever, but I view it as, for myself, I view it for a spectrum, and I'd say at some point in my life it was like, yeah, this kid, this kid has some serious case, but like, and like it does come back at certain points in my life, depending on the season, but at this point in my life, I wouldn't say I have OCD. I don't know. That's just how I approach it for myself. I'm not saying everyone should approach it that way. Anyways, my OCD was very much internalized. Very much I have to do certain things in order. It was just very much a control thing. It shows up in different ways. Intrusive thoughts were a big one for me, and it's kind of like, just think of it as a broken record. I don't think it's anything different from what the normal human thinks or intrusive thoughts that anyone has, but it's kind of like it just felt like a broken record, and I couldn't get out of that cycle until I started practicing some very backwards ways of trying to get the constant noise in my brain to stop, which is where, like, the OCD, obsessive thoughts, compulsive actions, da, 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 da. I don't think I necessarily had the traditional compulsions, but I definitely, my thoughts definitely caused me to behave in certain ways, because I was trying to maintain some kind of control because I felt out of control. So SH was definitely a big part of that, and it showed up in different forms, like food sanctions, water sanctions for myself, like, certain rules that don't make sense. This is something that I used to do when I was much, much younger, but like I would make it look like I ate until someone would realize that I'm not eating, and that would be that's when I'm allowed to eat. It's just having, like, I know that sounds scary. Sorry, is it too much? But yeah, it's like certain rules like that that would exist in my mind for me to feel like I still have kind of control. And a lot of them had to do with me feeling a physical sensation. So if it's hunger, if it's exhaustion, staying up all night was also a big thing, or like having insane and very impossible schedules, like feeling like I just have to physically feel something in order to quiet down the whatever is going on in my head. So that was kind of like my version of OCD or whatever. But like at that point in my life, I really wasn't sleeping, and like by not sleeping, I mean I did not sleep. My mom walked into my room. Bless her heart, she would walk into my room to check on us, and I'd always be up. I just didn't sleep. I just don't sleep. I hate the nighttime. I hate, like, I'm a fan of sleeping. Day sleeping is my thing. Love to nap. I am a napper through and through. I will nap for the rest of my life in the daytime. When it comes to the nighttime, I don't know what it is, but I think anyway, I've definitely put in certain practices into my routine to make it smoother and better. But yeah, so it was just a thing of I'm gonna be very careful about talking about medication, just because I don't want it to seem like something I'm promoting. But in order to sleep, I had to be on certain things because they were just concerned that like my heart is gonna explode or something, because I genuinely just didn't sleep at all. I think at some point I genuinely had a phobia of sleep. I did not like thinking about the nighttime would just mess with me because I know I'm just gonna stay there awake, and I just have to deal with these constant things that are going on in my head and that don't even make sense. It could be something so stupid, I kid you not, like something so laughable, but it's just replaying in your head until like yeah. Anyways, at some point I became like super, because I also had this complex of I'm in control. I had a weird relationship with any kind of medication aside from the sleep stuff that I was given to help with like depression, anxiety, whatever, because in my head I was like, no, I got this, I got this. So I'd, after however long of being on them, a short period, I'd be like, yeah, I'm cool now. I'm good, guys. Got it under control. I'm chilling, until I'd have like another episode of now feeling like I'm scared of myself, and then being like, oh, I think maybe I do need like a bit of help, or just to go back to therapy, or just like, I don't know. And then I'd repeat the whole cycle of medication. Oh, I'm good. And then back it was just a very endless cycle. And yeah, so I had a bad relationship with medication because of that. And I think I remember when I went to a different high school for A levels. I think for those two, oh, that's a lie. I think maybe for a year and a half, I wasn't actively. Anyway, I went a long time without taking any kind of medication or going to therapy or anything like that, because I think being back in the swing of things, like obviously post COVID, and like now being in an actual school and stuff like that, just I think the routine and just having everything be like, okay, this time doing that, da, 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 and also as in a very academically challenging and just very, yeah, just an academically challenging school. It was, you're on 24/7, you know what I mean? You don't have time to think about anything other than your books. So I think that was very helpful, and it definitely aided my need of control, where I could be super extreme about it, which is why I had this very interesting 4 a.m. Routine. Mostly also just because I felt like I needed to wake up at 4 a.m. because I felt like my brain was deteriorating over the years, so I felt like I needed to work harder. to achieve the same degree of stuff that everyone else was achieving. Hence why I would wake up at 4 a.m. to study and do stuff like that. It's interesting just because I think when it comes to the topic of essay is just very interesting just because I think we live in a generation where it's a trend to be woke. It's literally a trend to everyone wants to seem woke and seem like they're so in touch and grounded that people do this thing where they'll post about it and everyone wants to post about, mental health and, having these conversations with your friends. If it's about, SA, if it's about SH, if it's about whatever it is about, like just having those conversations. But it's only, at least in my experience, people are good at posting that and making it look like those are things they care about. But when you actually want to have the conversation with them in real life, no one wants to have that conversation. And it's just very interesting to me because it's like I will be sat in a room with people where it's like, person A posts a lot on their story about X, Y, and Z, but you're sat in this room making very interesting jokes. And it's like you're praised online for this, but you're sat in this room saying things about other people and just like tolerating gossip surrounding this sensitive topic, but then you go online and say and act like you're not that type of person. You know what I mean? And I feel like Gen Z has this issue of being so obsessed with how you're perceived and online specifically that you just fall into the trend of you fall into being it is trendy to be, but you don't actually practice any of these things. And I feel like those 2 years of my life is like when I really just shut down and just became like an academic weapon low key. I was just like in my room, didn't really talk to anyone. Obviously I had my friends and I had like a good time, but I'd rather break my leg. I'd rather do my uni degree twice than relive those 2 years of my life. Definitely. There's no freaking way. I think I was exposed to the real definition of what it is to be fake. And I think very much I'm not gonna act like I was above that for sure. Like, I think I definitely did a lot of flawed things and things that just needed to be checked. And it's so interesting to me how, like, people are so, again, back to this thing of presenting as woke online. It's like people are so desperate to show that they care about these things and they're so grounded whatever, but it's like you're still friends with someone who harassed person X and person Z. You're hanging out with the person who did X, Y, and Z to your friend. You're hanging out with, you know what I mean? You're still tolerating certain people around you and having conversations with people around you and keeping it cordial to avoid problems with this person who did very incorrect, harmful things to people. And in my life, like, I was surrounded by a lot of people who were friends with people who are actually just dangerous and are friends with. I remember being groped once at a club that by a close friend's friend. Like, they introduced me to that person one day. I told them about it and they're still like friends with this person, and I'm like, okay, bet. And at that point, like, obviously I was like, okay, maybe I'm being dramatic, maybe and da da da. And I did fall into the trap of just like tolerating it and like being like, okay, let me not cause any problems. But now I've very much cut off a lot. I think there's only one person I talked to from that school, even though I had like a tight knit friend group, just because I think that friend group tolerated a lot of fucked up things that I don't know. Anyway, and they were just like people kept being friends. I think everyone in that school, everyone was friends with you. You're friends with you stay friends with a person who has put people in danger. But when it comes to someone who's acting a bit weird or has like a little bit of a personality quirk, or just like I don't know, maybe they're just a bit different or a bit like, those are the people that they marginalize. And it's like those people are actually good people. They're just different. Like, you marginalize the kid who watches anime, but you're friends with the person who literally harassed your friend. Like, I don't, that's just genuinely how I was surrounded by a lot of people like that. I feel like in that school, I also learned very much. I don't know, if, unfortunately, like, SA is something that happened that occurred twice in my life. Um, Once when I was younger, where I think I don't want to use the word lucky because I wasn't lucky at all. Lucky is not the word, but barely, barely, as barely lucky as one can barely be. Um, I don't know how else to say that. And then anyway, the second time I wasn't so lucky, and that time I was very much older, and I can't remember how I was like probably like 18, 17, and this one, and it was like it was also one of those things of like, you tell your friends and then they kind of it's like people become it's like that thing again of like, let's not turn it into a big thing, let's not make it a big thing type of thing because everyone's trying to protect. I don't know what everyone's trying to protect, but I feel like I'm overprotecting people because I just don't get why I would protect these people. These are people that like physically hurt me, and like I had to deal with the repercussions of that, and then they probably went on and lived their lives. And it's so funny because for the longest time I had to be friends with these people, and the people that were um very much close to my life in two different ways. And I had to kind of just like I just think yeah, anyways. But anyway, at some point I feel like the whole mentality of keeping blaming myself for everything that happened to me started to catch up to me, because not only did I feel like my mental health was deteriorating in the sense where I was just like depressed, this thing of like now I felt like my actual brain was deteriorating. Okay, like guys, reading this I don't know why I'm laughing. Reading became a problem. Writing, I have this joke with my friends that I have like dyslexia of the tongue. I don't think that's not an actual thing, but like reading and writing became an issue. I Read became an issue. Like it was actually a lot of things just felt like it was becoming an issue, and I've just lived life in a dissociative state for a very long time. And I feel like I've vaguely talked about this on like maybe one random YouTube video. I can't remember which one it was. I think I've talked about it more than once maybe. Or I don't know if I did I even post, there's so many things that I come on here and I sit just because I'm feeling something. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna talk about this, but I'll literally keep it in my iPad for myself. Um but yeah, anywho's, yeah, just like very much in a dissociative state. Like I felt like nothing's real. I never feel like anything's real in general. Even right now, like I feel like that's just like a state that I've lived in for majority of my life. Probably now that I feel like now that I've had the opportunity to kind of sit down and reflect on my childhood and stuff like that. I think probably the first time that my safety was ever put compromised. I think that's the first time that I just went and then from it's almost like I remember the moment where like the world just didn't feel the same. And also it's like experiencing something like that very young. I think you start to learn certain lessons that you shouldn't have to learn so young, and you start to behave in certain ways in terms of your safety that you shouldn't just have to learn that kind of behavior at such a young age. And I just felt like I had to grow up fast because these are things that I had to kind of learn by myself in order to take care of myself, because I don't think that I hope you can still hear me. I don't think that I couldn't tell anyone about this thing, you know what I mean? Like I couldn't, because I thought I was to blame for this thing, where I would get in trouble for this thing. So it's like I very much had to figure out how to heal, how to battle the emotions that came out of it, and my perception of the world that came out of it, and my perception of safety that came out of it by myself. And I think I by the time I'd gone to university, it's interesting because I feel like I just felt like I was slowly losing it. Like I actually just felt like one day I was going to wake up and become a crazy person. Like I literally, cause like at this point, just imagine like reading and shit that's supposed to be easy becomes so hard. And it's like you're also dissociating, so half the time you're like, is this real? Is this not real? Like I'm barely sleeping and I'm just like a, like an anxious person. I'm paranoid of everything. I'm like, one day I'm gonna wake up and induce schizophrenia or something. Like I was waiting for the day that I actually tapped out of reality, like very seriously. And this was like a big fear that I had for me. Like it was such a deep fear that like I'm sat here laughing, but I think these tears in my eyes are real. Oh God, please. Anyway, yeah, so I remember when I went to university and I think the first winter really just like did a number on me. And at this point, like I remember, yeah, I had some interesting doctors back in UG, bro. Anyway, love them, but so I basically just like wasn't on medication. So at this point, like I'm not on medication, right? Like I don't take anything, like I'm cool, like I'm at this point I was very on top of my routine that keeps me sane, if that makes sense. Like that keeps me healthy rather. Let's not use that word. So in terms of meditation's a big part of my life, my relationship with God, keeping on top of like going to gym and like keeping myself busy with like extracurriculars, if it was like my podcast or like at the time, or if it was like music, or just very much keeping myself on this very composed routine that was, even when it came to like food and stuff, like very much catered to making sure that my nervous system is as regulated as it can be, and like I can maintain being as healthy as I can be both physically and mentally. But I think at some point in time, it's happened like a couple of times in life where, and I think this is like one of the darkest places to be, where it's like your life is so perfect and it's like you have everything going for you, not on top of, being this privileged kid who has all of these opportunities. You also you're getting good grades, you finally have like great friends, you finally, are going to your dream university, like you're doing X, Y, and Z, and you could even have one of the best days of your life. But it's like once you have a second alone, you still kind of feel like there's this thing that's moving with you. You know what I mean? And you feel like it's never gonna like leave. And I think I had a lot of those days in Canada for sure. And I think I just reached a breaking point where I was just like, I remember it was like 5 a.m. Hadn't slept, like I'm panic attack, feeling like I'm going to literally die or something. And I just called my mom and I was like, I'm just so over this, dude. Like I'm just over this. I was having the most vivid intrusive thoughts that just like wouldn't leave, like, after like years of, beating like this like SH thing, suddenly it comes back, and like all these bad practices come back because you're like, how am I taking care of myself for so long and being on top of everything for so long, and the thing is still with me. It's like it was just, yeah, anyways. And at that point I think it became a I really just wanted I just didn't know where to go from there. I didn't know where to go from there. I really just didn't know where to go from there. And I think at this point is when bless my parents, and thank God I have like parents, because a lot of people aren't lucky enough to have a support system who's able to be like, okay, if you need therapy, let's go to therapy. Like, what's the best way to do this? Let me pray for you. Let me hold your hand. Da 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 da. Like, a lot of people don't have that in their life. So I'm very grateful that I have those kind of parents. But yeah, at this point, it's like I had kind of tried everything, and I don't think medication is something that I wanted to be on long term. So, and because I had hopped off a medication in a very unsafe way, I had these like withdrawal symptoms that kind of never left. So, and they kind of like got really, I don't know, like tremors were a big part of them. Yeah, tremors were were a big part of them, where like it became super hard. Now you can imagine why I really thought I was about to go crazy, because like on top of not being able to like read and stuff, like I'm just hopping. I casually just hopped off of this medication. I took it for like 5 seconds for just like a week because I was like, okay, maybe this can help me. Da 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 da. Don't do that. Never do that. Never do that. Please, like, never make decisions about medication by yourself. Please never ever do that. It's so dumb, so stupid. You don't want to have to live with the repercussions of doing that for a very long time just because like you think you know what you're doing. You don't. Never do that. Learned that the hard way twice. Um, Anyway, first time around, it's like it introduced this tremor thing to me, and it's like now I couldn't walk down the stairs because I'm smiling, but it was not funny at the time. I had to take it took me forever to get downstairs, and it was so embarrassing, and I was just so over it, and it was like taking all this energy from me. I can't hold a pen because I'm like freaking shaking, and like it would go to my neck, and like my head is just vibrating, and it's like sometimes it will still come back, but back then it was so damn obvious. Like I remember just getting off of the train and going to class when I lived downtown, and it would be this thing of like you could just watch that person who's walking up the stairs see me walk down, and they're like, does this like is this kid good, like so it was just a very humbling, very not nice situation. And that's when I kind of got a different kind of medical help, which wasn't I approached my treatment in a different way, because at this point I think like now we're just like, okay, we just want to understand like on a biological level what's happening in my brain, because now this is like, let's pause on this talk therapy. Let's actually just like, can we do a brain scan? Like that was literally all we wanted. That's all. So luckily we were able to like find this center, and going through the brain scans also was a very humbling experience, because it's also like things that you've never said show up on this what do you call QEEG brain map. Um I don't know if that's the official proper name, but they show up, and like I'm sat there in this room with this doctor and my mom, and just like he's saying all of these things, and I'm like, what? No, it was a very hard conversation. It was very, very weird. But then I started these treatments and like this was also just a very isolating, very dark period, because I think I had to, obviously, because I'm far away from home, far away from a support system. And my mom, she came from it like maybe just like 2 weeks or something, but you're far away from a solid support system, and it's one of those treatments where it gets worse before it gets better. And it was just one of those things like with machines and stuff. I think I have like pictures. Maybe I'll throw up a few pictures, um but yeah. And it was very much something that like I was very much going through alone and by myself. And a lot of dark days came out of that, and days where I didn't feel safe on my own. And just very, yeah, it just wasn't a fun time. Wasn't a fun time. And luckily that period after all of that is when I went back to Uganda for like a long, long summer. So I was just around friends and all of that. And then came back to Canada, and like I think I and that treatment, first of all, that treatment, like it's not a very realistic option, just because it's extremely expensive. And I just don't think it's a realistic treatment option. I mean, if you have the means, go for it. But I think it's like it's one of those things where I don't think I'd even feel comfortable continuing it, because it's everyone's healing, or everyone's process, everyone's timeline looks completely different. You could be cool after a week, some people are cool after 2 months, and some people are cool after 2 years. And I clearly, the way it was progressing, it was going to be one of those things where I'm in this doing this like thing for going through these like sessions for months and close to probably a year, the way it was looking. And so I only did it for like two to 3 months maybe. And at that point I also just really didn't want to do it anymore. I tried to stop like twice. I was just, again, it gets worse before it gets better. So you're just, and also on top of this, like I'm, in this treatment center for 5 days a week for maybe like 3 hours. And on top of this, I have school every day. Like I have a life to live. Like, babe, like I have things to do, places to be, like, like it's just not something sustainable. It's just very not it's not sustainable. I feel like that's that type of thing you do when you're, I don't know. Anyways, that's that. And then so anyway, I stopped at some point. Like at some point I was just like over it. But it was a very I'm very grateful for like the people that I met there and the people that were help and the team that was helping me through everything. I think they definitely made things they were just very understanding, very warm people that just like made me feel less of this person who has this like problem and more of just like a normal person who maybe has a few things that they didn't handle properly at the time, therefore it's become this full-blown thing. Anyway, I feel like I'm definitely at a place in my life where I've gotten a hang of what I need, in if that makes sense, and I'm very very specific with the type of people that I surround myself with. I make this joke that like I know it sounds bad and this isn't me trying to come off in a certain type of way, but I feel like it's how I've had to be just because of how I am. But I'm very quick. It doesn't matter if we've been in each other's lives for since birth or for 10 years, if we've been best friends for eternity, if we're even high-fiving and I don't even freaking know. Like you know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter to me how deep our how long we've been in each other's lives for. If I feel like the way in which you're changing is in conflict or just very much not aligning, I feel like it's healthy to cut that person off. I don't know, it's something about me that I say I would consider both a strength and a weakness because I never let myself get too attached just because I've learned the hard way that someone who is close to you and the same people that can turn around and say, "Oh, I care for you, I love you," can also compromise your physical health or your physical safety rather. Like I've just been exposed to that my mind is like never gonna hang on to, oh, because I've known this person for this long that I'm not gonna cut them off because they don't align with the way I want my life to go. They don't align with the environment that I want to create for myself. You know what I mean? So yeah, I feel like I have like such a solid group of people, just individuals around me, and that we can have like very progressive, very real conversation with each other where we just call each other out on our bullshit and they call me out on my bullshit. And then when they see me like acting in a way that's not helpful to my mental health, like or vice versa, I don't see them acting in a way that's helpful to their mental health, like we're quick to be like, you actually need to get up off your ass. But at the same time, we're also quick to be like loving if that's what the person needs. Because I feel like sometimes people do this thing where they avoid conflict and they avoid having those hard conversations with the people that you love just in order to keep them in your life, but you're not helping them if you're gonna sit there and just tell them what they want to hear versus what they need to hear. So I think, yeah, yeah, I don't even know what I was gonna say. What? I've been talking for an hour. But anywho's, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. The moral of the TED Talk is shoot, man, just like be real. Stop being fake people, dude. I'm so over the way we operate, like at least back home and like friends of friends of friends. It's so weird to me how just like a lot of people that I even consider close that know the people who put me in certain situations, like they're still friends with them. And even people who have been put in certain positions by a man, like they're still friends with that man. And I'm just like, what kind of warped society are we living in? Anyway, yeah, maybe I should my brain is kind of just like going in circles now. So I'm gonna leave it at that. But I feel like I could go on and on and on about all of this, so I'm gonna leave it there for now. I'm not crying. I just yawned. But have a great rest of your day. I swear to you, I'm not crying. I swear to you, I just yawned. I think I have an iron. Like, I do have an iron deficiency. So every time I feel like my eyes are always. They are always. Yeah, my eyes are always tearing. So yo, this business of technology, bro. Like, tell me why I just recorded a whole clip. The mic wasn't on apparently. I came to clarify some stuff because there are a lot of gaps in everything that I said, but I don't feel not everything has to be explained or put out there. I feel like there's power in keeping certain things to yourself, not because we're taught that like, oh, you have to keep things private because like people can't know all these bad things or like these negative, because I feel like people teach us to keep things private in a way that's like, don't embarrass yourself by letting people know X, Y, and Z, or like, I don't know. I think just growing up in a very traditional conservative society, I think people make it seem like having conversations like this is like life ending, life threatening, whatever. I know how I want my life to turn out. I know the type of people I want to be surrounded by, the type of environment that I want to be in. So in my head, I'm like, this aligns with me. So if it doesn't align with anyone else, that's really couldn't be less of my problem. Yeah, when I was talking about like how life is now, I feel like I very much implied something that is not the case. I implied that I am thriving, like I'm back on top of a routine that's like whoa, and I feel like I'm doing great and I'm very happy. Ever since that I had like a certain minor situation where the second time that I decided to hop off a certain medication that you just can't hop off of, I had some very interesting withdrawals that were very unsafe. Luckily, one of my best friend's mother is a doctor, so I was telling her all of these things and she told her mother, and I was lectured. I was basically lectured because, yo, I'm actually please just don't do that. Like, I feel like that's so stupid. Please, never toy with your health like that. Like, sometimes I just cringe at the BS that I was doing because now I'm very much paying for everything. Anyway, now I have a better relationship with medication and whatever. So, and finally found something that fits. Again, I feel really weird saying this because I don't want to promote that, not because like I see that there's a problem with it and I'm like, oh, bad, bad, bad. I'm just like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. That's a serious kind of, like it's, I don't know. It's a touchy topic when you talk about medication stuff. I don't know, at least to me. But anyway, I have a better relationship with it. So I feel like I finally found something that fits my specific case, I guess. And I've been on that for like about a year, and that's been really great. It's been life changing actually, and just really refreshing. I think people who really know me, like my parents, they've definitely made comments here and there where they're like, Gabby, like we can see the version of you that was like 10 ages of 10 and below coming back, which is an amazing thing because I feel like that's me. That's who I was. I was a little creative, like silly, low key a diva, and like low key, not that I'm a diva, but like, just like being free and just doing whatever I want to do and just living life the way I want to live. Like, I feel like I was such an expressive kid, and I just love the fact that people who have known me since day one can like see that comeback. And again, like I'm not the type of person who wants to be on medication long term, but I feel like it's allowed me to feel like getting back, slowly regulating my nervous system, helping me get back to a version of me that I thought was lost, or like a version of existing within my body that I thought was lost, and within my mind and soul and whatever. And I feel like I'm very much starting from scratch in terms of we're like socially, like the people I surround myself with, things I tolerate. Um, yeah, I've stayed on it for a very long time, but at some point soon or whatever, I don't know. I'll probably taper off, and I just want to be me, myself, and I, and just like get back to having a healthier routine. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because I felt like I made it seem like I'm back on my high horse. But yeah, which in some aspects I think I am definitely for sure. Rock on, dudes. Stay safe. Stay in school. don't be an idiot.